This is a capsule, and we're going to discuss a leaked audio containing information from Alexandre de Moraes, auxiliary judge. He complains about the workload in Alexandre de Moraes' office. He says he's under a lot of pressure, that the minister demands too much and interferes with everything. He was in a very difficult situation and had wanted to leave the office for some time, but hadn't had the opportunity because he thought things would improve. Things would calm down, and then people would continue with these absurd attacks again. Look at that remarkable saying. I'm going to play the audio for you now. It's really impressive, the person who recorded it. It appears it was Eduardo Tagliaferro, okay? It's a recording of an audio message sent by Judge Ayrton Vieira to Eduardo Tagliaferro. He was complaining about his situation there. This is very interesting for several reasons. First, it's what I've always said. Everyone knows something is amiss with the CNCF. Everyone knew Alexandre de Moraes was overstepping his bounds. This is another clear confirmation of this kind of behavior, but there's another aspect to this that I also find interesting. Remember when I told you that one way people could go after Alexandre de Moraes was to uncover a harassment case? Whether it's sexual harassment, moral harassment, or the like, this case perfectly exemplifies moral harassment against a person. It's time for Alexandre de Moraes to be taken. Accuse him of moral harassment and suspend him pending investigation. The CF itself can take this step to preserve its reputation. Let's examine this case. This news was suggested by Cidadão de Alexandria, Peter Turguniev, and others. Thanks to everyone who suggested news on our site, Libertarian.com, and thanks to you for watching our video. If you like our content, please like and subscribe to our channel. Before considering anything, let's listen to the audio. Here it is. The judge who supported Moraes at the CF complained. Listen, it's Antonio Vieira speaking.
Good morning, Eduardo. How are you? Things are really tough, man. I'm not coping anymore, physically, psychologically, or emotionally. I can't sleep peacefully. I have no peace of mind. I'm completely losing my mental composure. What little I had left. Things are really bad. And what you said, damn it, even later regarding custody hearing issues, you know. He's giving his opinion. Wait a minute, right? Look.
Notice what he's saying here. He's saying he's losing his mental composure. This is a classic case of psychological harassment under the law. When the employer pressures the employee so much that they lose their mental composure. So it's already considered workplace bullying based on this guy's statement alone. If they want to proceed with this, it's already classified as workplace bullying. Another important point is that he's talking to Eduardo Tagliaferro. He called Eduardo, presumably Eduardo Tagliaferro. Also, this conversation took place after the January 8th custody hearings. So people are already complaining because it was a hassle during the election. They were forced into a lot of things back then. Remember all those Vazatoga messages? The first Vazatoga that was published in Folha de São Paulo? Those revelations really pushed the limit. People know that, being a judge, he studied law. He knows that these actions are wrong. What Alexandre de Moraes is doing is excessive. It's a huge mistake, so he's saying that Alexandre de Moraes is pushing the limit, which is absurd. He doesn't leave anything out. I'll continue listening.
Honestly, I'm not sure how this will evolve, but I've clearly reached my limit. Actually, I've long since exceeded it. And now I'm facing a situation. I had planned to bring forward my departure. I thought that with the temperature dropping, etc., etc. But it surged again exponentially.
And now I'm stuck. What's he saying here? He was probably wanting to leave around the time of the elections. But then he said that now that the elections were over and Lula had taken office, things had settled down, so he was going to resign to avoid this situation. But then came January 8th and all the ensuing chaos, which forced him to continue dealing with Alexandre de Moraes.
I'm reluctant to make any moves because it would give the impression that I'm abandoning ship at the worst possible moment. I find this unpleasant and wouldn't do it. Leaving the minister in a difficult spot is very challenging. My family is being severely impacted, and the entire work situation is complicated. There's pressure from all sides and demands, as we discuss. There's no credibility. Everything that happened yesterday. We're also surrounded by people who, as you mentioned earlier, so it's very difficult, extremely challenging.
In other words, he's complaining about the working conditions in the minister's office. This is the kind of thing I was telling you about. So there are 2 key points. First, it's clear that the individuals involved know they're doing something wrong. It's evident they were aware of their wrongdoing and were doing it precisely under pressure from Alexandre de Moraes, who demanded these results. This was evident both during the elections when they censored posts from right-wing individuals and persecuted them. But then came January 8th, and they started demanding that we continue, that we have to arrest all these people and put them in jail. I don't know what else. A lot of pressure with people acknowledging their wrongdoing. This is the first point, and it's a very significant one, okay? This will certainly be used. This demonstrates the other issue that people will now face with these leaked messages from Eduardo Tagliaferro's cell phone. Eduardo Tagliaferro is currently in Europe, right? And Alexandre de Moraes continues to persecute him, right? He refused to unblock his account in Brazil, which he claims is used to support his daughters financially. This is outrageous. In any legal proceeding, no one completely freezes the assets of someone with minor children because you need to cover the child's expenses, right? But Alexandre de Moraes doesn't care about disregarding jurisprudence, ignoring the Supreme Court's rulings, disregarding everything. They have to cut off Eduardo Tagliaferro's funds immediately without justification because apparently there's no valid reason. In theory, freezing or blocking someone's assets is justified when they've done something wrong and are using those funds to defend themselves because in principle, in theory, punishment should only be applied. When a person has been found guilty, freezing bank accounts and similar measures are only intended to prevent someone from hiding evidence or attempting to flee or engaging in other obstructive. That's not the case here, is it? He left Brazil legally and wasn't required to stay in the country, right? In other words, Alexandre de Moraes has now frozen the account of someone who had already put his family at risk here in Brazil. This is already an outrageous situation revealing the utterly absurd nature of Alexandre de Moraes. But there's another aspect to this story that I mentioned when we first started discussing Alexandre de Moraes' potential inclusion under Magnitsky. I recalled the case of the ICC prosecutor, the International Criminal Court, whose name is Karim Khan. He is the one who issued the arrest warrant for Netanyahu. So he's the prosecutor in the case. Although the judge signed the warrant, he's responsible for the entire process against Netanyahu in Israel, which is outrageous because, as you recall, the aggression came from Hamas. It was Hamas that invaded Israel, not the other way around. So it's outrageous that Netanyahu is being put in the same situation he ordered others to be arrested in. Netanyahu, Yahya Sinwar, and other Hamas leaders. However, for Hamas members, this kind of thing is irrelevant because they're hiding in tunnels deep within Gaza. So an international arrest warrant makes no difference to them. It makes a difference for Netanyahu. In other words, he effectively only penalized Netanyahu. So it's an absurd case. Trump imposed sanctions on him, and these sanctions affected people linked to him in the court, causing it to cease functioning. Then you know what they came up with? The ICC prosecutor resigned before the investigation into sexual misconduct was completed. They accused him of sexual harassment, and he was advised to resign temporarily during the investigation. In fact, everyone knows he resigned to preserve the court, that is, to save it. Was there a case of sexual misconduct? I don't doubt it. This case is already framed as moral harassment by Alexandre de Moraes against his staff. They can already demand Alexandre de Moraes' resignation. No, here's the thing, it's getting ugly for you. Ask for a temporary suspension step down temporarily to respond to these accusations of moral harassment, and then let the rest of the CF officials resolve the issue, putting an end to the illegalities in Bolsonaro's process and closing the case. Completely closing the case and thus preserving Alexandre de Moraes. He will be accused of moral harassment, of course, but moral harassment is something every employer is accused of moral harassment, right? And if there's a female employee, it's automatically considered sexual harassment. It's a way to remove him from this situation and resolve the issue without his involvement. Will they use it for that purpose? I'm not sure, but note that the person who released this audio was Paulo Capelli from Metropolis. You know that Metropolis is associated with Brasilia's socialist aristocratic elite? My view is that they're already moving towards resolving this through the moral harassment angle. I don't know what will happen, right? They're discussing among themselves how to resolve this issue because they've already realized they will have to put an end to the Bolsonaro process and end the issue of censorship on social media. There's no alternative to this. And now the big question is how to do this convincingly. And now you already have an excuse. Moral harassment, which is terrible. They'll have to impeach him anyway. There's no alternative. These people will have to follow Karim Khan's approach, as seen at the International Criminal Court, which followed the same path. Just out of curiosity. Thanks for watching the video until the end. Besides liking, sharing, and subscribing to the channel, consider becoming a sponsor with amounts starting from $1.99. Click the Become a Member button below to learn about the conditions and benefits of sponsoring the channel. For more information about our project, visit the websites listed on the screen.